Hello and welcome to section 2 of beginning JavaScript and jQuery. In this section as a whole, we're going to be looking at loops and conditional branching and what that is. For a little bit deeper look at the section, we're going to be talking about for loops, while loops, if statements, and switch statements. So let's go ahead and begin with the for loop. Well, to start with, we're going to talk about in general what loops are from a programming standpoint. And then we're going to talk about how to use a for loop. What are loops? In programming, loops allow you to execute a block of code a certain number of times. This, as you start really getting into JavaScript, you'll understand why you may need this a little bit more. But, as a whole, most loops, try this again. What are loops? In programming, loops allow you to execute a block of code a certain number of times. This could simply be, counting from 1 to 100 on the screen, or, if let's say you had a JSON file that had a number of blog posts in it, you would need to execute the code to display each of the blog posts onto the screen. And to do that, you would use a loop. And most loops that we have share two common components. And that is a condition. That means that when will this code execute? And the statement. So, if this condition is true, what am I going to do? So one of the first loops that we're going to look at for the JavaScript language is probably also the most common one that you will use. And that is the for loop. And the syntax for the for loop is as follows. You have the initialization component, the condition, the final expression, and then what you're going to execute itself. The initialization always typically used to set a counter, and that's one of the first things you're going to need to do is how many times, you'll need to know how many times this block will execute. So, it's best to always, have some kind of counter or have some way of knowing what, something that you can always check to see whether or not this code needs to stop. Then you have the condition. And this is a Boolean expression that is evaluated before each loop iteration. Before any code executes, it's going to check this condition to make sure that condition is still met. If it's true, the code will execute. If it's false, it'll go on past the for loop. And the final expression is an expression that's executed at the end of each loop iteration. This is where you will typically increment the counter. There could be times where you need to take, instead of increasing it by 1, you'll need to decrease it. You'll come across those as you need it. So let's go ahead and look at an example of a for loop and have a much better understanding of what we're talking about here. So back over here in our code, I have just a very simple for loop here. And what it's going to do is it's going to just simply write to the screen what the current value of the counter variable is. So here is my initialization component of the for loop. And here you see I'm creating a counter variable, or variable named counter. I'm assigning it the value of 1. Next, we have our condition. And what we're saying is that as long as this counter variable is less than or equal to the number 10, execute this code right here. And then once the code executes, go ahead and increment counter by 1. So let's go ahead and look at the screen, and as we can see, our code executed here. Executed 10 times because it met the requirement. It met the requirement 10 times to execute. So as you can see, this is just a very simple example for us to use, but at the same time, it really shows what you can do with a for loop. Now there is some other variations of for loops. There is for each and such like that. But for beginning JavaScript, we're just simply going to look at the for loop, and that's it.